In the remote hills of Washington state, near Manistash Ridge west of Ellensburg, sits a mystery that has puzzled investigators for decades. What appears to be an ordinary well on private property has defied explanation since the 1990s when a man named Mel Waters first brought it to public attention. The hole, roughly 9 feet in diameter with a stone retaining wall, seems to have no bottom. Objects dropped into it never make a sound when they hit. Animals refuse to go near it. Radio equipment picks up strange signals in its vicinity. For years, the exact location remained lost to researchers and curiosity seekers alike. But 2025 has brought renewed interest as advanced technology and recent land surveys have helped investigators narrow down the site's position. The question that haunts everyone who learns about this place remains the same. What exactly lies beneath the surface of this seemingly impossible pit? The original mystery returns. The story begins on February 21, 1997, when a man identifying himself as Mel Waters called into Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM radio show. Waters claimed he owned property approximately 9 miles west of Ellensburg, Washington, where he discovered something that defied explanation. On his land sat what appeared to be an ordinary well, 9 feet 9 inches in diameter, surrounded by a stone retaining wall that extended about 15 feet down. But this wasn't an ordinary well at all. Waters explained that he and his neighbors had been using the hole as a garbage dump for years. They threw everything into it: refrigerators, old tires, broken appliances, tons of household trash. The hole never filled up. No matter how much they dumped into it, the pit seemed to swallow everything without a trace. Objects dropped into the darkness never made a sound when they hit bottom. In fact, they never seemed to hit bottom at all. Curious about the hole's actual depth, Waters decided to conduct his own measurements. As an avid fisherman, he had plenty of fishing line available. He attached a 1-pound weight to the line and began lowering it into the hole. The first spool went down 4,500 feet without hitting anything solid. He reeled it back up, attached another spool, and continued. Spool after spool of fishing line disappeared into the darkness. By the time Waters ran out of line, he claimed to have lowered 80,000 feet over 15 miles of fishing line into the hole without ever reaching a bottom. To test whether water existed at those depths, Waters attached a roll of Lifesavers candy to the line before sending it down. If the hole contained water, the candy would dissolve. When he pulled the line back up, the Lifesavers remained completely dry and intact. Whatever lay at the end of that fishing line, it wasn't a water table or underground lake. The hole's strange properties extended beyond its apparent infinite depth. Waters described how his dogs refused to approach the area. Even when forced, the animals would dig their feet into the ground and resist being brought near the pit. No wildlife existed in the immediate vicinity, no birds, insects, or small animals, despite the surrounding forest being full of life. Birds would actually fly around the area rather than over it, as if they sensed something dangerous below. Waters also noticed that the hole affected radio equipment. His radio would pick up strange signals when positioned near the pit, signals that didn't correspond to any known broadcast stations in the area. The electromagnetic interference seemed to originate from somewhere deep underground, though. Waters had no way to measure or analyze these anomalies with the technology available in the 1990s. Perhaps the most disturbing story Waters shared involved his neighbor's dog. The neighbor's pet had died, and rather than bury it, he decided to dispose of the body by throwing it into the hole. A few days later, that same dog appeared back at the neighbor's property, alive and apparently healthy. The animal looked exactly the same, responded to its name, and showed no signs of injury or distress. The neighbor was convinced it was his dog, though he couldn't explain how it had returned from the dead or climbed out of a hole that seemed to have no bottom. Waters made several appearances on Coast to Coast AM between 1997 and 2002, each time adding new details to his story. He claimed that government agents eventually became interested in his property and the mysterious hole. According to Waters, federal officials forced him to relocate, classifying the area and restricting public access. After his final radio appearance in 2002, Waters disappeared from public discussion entirely, and the exact location of his property became lost to researchers and curiosity seekers. The story captivated Coast to Coast AM's massive audience, but it also raised questions about its authenticity. Waters provided no physical evidence beyond his personal testimony. No photographs, video footage, or scientific measurements supported his claims. The remote location he described made independent verification nearly impossible, especially after government restrictions allegedly went into effect. For nearly 3 decades, the tale of Mel's Hole existed in the realm of urban legend. Online forums and conspiracy communities discussed the story extensively, but no credible scientific investigation ever confirmed Waters' claims. Some dismissed the entire account as elaborate fiction designed to entertain radio audiences. Others believed federal agencies had successfully covered up something significant, preventing any meaningful research into the anomaly. The lack of concrete evidence didn't diminish the story's cultural impact. Mel's Hole became one of the most famous unexplained phenomena in American folklore, referenced in books, documentaries, and countless internet discussions. The mystery persisted because no one could definitively prove or disprove Waters' claims. The hole's alleged location remained classified or simply lost, leaving the truth buried somewhere in the remote hills of central Washington. Waters' fishing line experiments, while primitive by today's standards, represented the only systematic attempt to measure the hole's depth. His methods were simple but logical: attach weight to line, lower it down, see if it hits bottom. The fact that 80,000 feet of line never encountered solid ground suggested something far beyond any known geological formation. Natural caves and crevices have physical limits based on rock strength and geological pressure. No natural formation should extend indefinitely into the Earth's crust without eventually reaching bedrock. The story remained frozen in time, a 1990s mystery preserved in radio archives and internet discussions. But technology has advanced dramatically since Waters first called Coast to Coast AM. Modern scientific instruments can accomplish things that would have seemed impossible during the original investigation. 2025 technology meets ancient mystery. Ground-penetrating radar systems and advanced sonar equipment have been brought to the site by various research teams over the years, hoping to finally solve the mystery that Waters' primitive methods couldn't. These modern instruments represent a significant technological leap from fishing line and weights. Ground-penetrating radar can typically see through solid rock and create detailed images of underground structures. Sonar systems designed for mapping deep ocean trenches can operate at depths of several miles. But the results have been consistently puzzling. Multiple independent teams using different equipment have attempted simple depth measurements, lowering specialized instruments into the hole on reinforced cables. The acoustic ranging systems fire concentrated sound pulses down the shaft and measure how long it takes for echoes to return. In normal circumstances, these systems can accurately measure depths of several thousand feet. Yet team after team reports the same impossible result: no echo returns. The sound pulses seem to disappear into the darkness without ever hitting a solid surface. Skeptics have tried various approaches to debunk Waters' claims. Geological survey teams have used standard depth sounding equipment, expecting to find bedrock or debris at reasonable depths. Private research groups have deployed sonar units that should easily map the hole's true dimensions. University researchers have lowered sensitive instruments designed to detect any solid surface or water table. All have encountered the same phenomenon that Waters described decades earlier. The hole appears to have no bottom. The geological impossibility of this situation cannot be overstated. Natural caves and crevices have physical limits based on rock strength and geological pressure. The Earth's crust in central Washington consists of layers of sedimentary rock, volcanic deposits, and basalt formations. These materials have known structural properties that determine how deep any natural void can extend before the surrounding rock collapses under its own weight. A shaft extending more than a few hundred feet straight down through solid rock would require either artificial construction or geological conditions that don't exist in the region. The bedrock layers beneath the Manistash Ridge area are well documented through decades of geological surveys. There are no known cave systems, lava tubes, or other natural formations that could create a vertical void of the depth Waters claim to measure. The pressure dynamics alone make an infinitely deep hole physically impossible. As depth increases, atmospheric pressure should increase proportionally due to the weight of air above. At extreme depths, the pressure would become so intense that any void would collapse. The structural integrity of surrounding rock formations would fail long before reaching the depths Waters describe. Yet the consistent failure of modern equipment to find a bottom suggests something beyond conventional explanation. Multiple teams using different technologies and methodologies have produced similar results. When several independent groups encounter the same impossible measurements, equipment malfunction becomes an unlikely explanation. The consistency of these findings across different instruments and operators points to a genuine anomaly that current scientific understanding cannot adequately explain. The acoustic properties of the hole present another puzzle. In any normal deep shaft, Sound waves should reflect off the walls and bottom, creating echoes and reverberations. The complete absence of acoustic returns suggests either an impossibly deep void or some unknown mechanism that absorbs or redirects sound waves. Neither explanation fits within accepted physical principles. Temperature measurements taken at various depths show gradual cooling as instruments descend, which is normal for underground environments. But the rate of temperature change doesn't correspond to known geothermal gradients for the region. The cooling pattern suggests the hole extends far deeper than regional geology should allow. Water table analysis presents additional complications. The area's groundwater systems are well mapped through agricultural and municipal surveys. Any deep shaft should intersect the water table within a few hundred feet of the surface. Yet instruments lowered into the hole consistently return dry, showing no evidence of groundwater at any measured depth. The electromagnetic properties around the site have drawn particular attention from researchers. Sensitive instruments detect unusual energy signatures that don't match typical geological formations. These readings suggest some kind of organized electromagnetic activity rather than random natural phenomena. The patterns appear to follow regular cycles, implying an energy source that operates according to some unknown mechanism. What makes the situation even more perplexing is that the anomalous readings aren't limited to the hole itself. Instruments positioned around the site detect effects extending outward from the central location. The influence seems to radiate in all directions, affecting equipment at increasing distances from the hole. This expanding zone of influence suggests whatever lies beneath the surface is becoming more active or powerful over time. The implications of these findings challenge fundamental assumptions about the natural world. If the measurements are accurate, they point to underground systems that operate according to physical laws different from current scientific understanding. Every attempt to explain the hole's properties using conventional methods has instead revealed new mysteries that contradict established principles of geology, physics, and engineering. As research continues, one disturbing pattern has emerged from the data. The anomalous effects aren't remaining confined to the immediate area around the hole. The zone of unusual activity appears to be expanding, affecting a wider radius with each passing month. The widening dead zone. What makes this electromagnetic interference particularly significant is that it mirrors the radio anomalies Waters first described in 1997. During his original coast-to-coast AM appearances, Waters explained how his radio equipment would pick up strange signals when positioned near the hole. These weren't typical radio broadcasts or interference patterns that radio operators would recognize. Instead, the signals seemed to originate from deep underground, creating electromagnetic disturbances that affected his equipment in ways he couldn't explain. Waters described how his radio would receive transmissions that didn't correspond to any known broadcast stations in the central Washington area. The signals appeared strongest when his equipment was positioned closest to the hole, suggesting the electromagnetic activity originated from somewhere beneath the surface. He noted that the interference followed patterns rather than occurring randomly, implying some kind of organized electromagnetic phenomenon rather than simple geological interference. The radio anomalies Waters reported have never been independently verified or documented by scientific equipment. No follow-up investigations in the decades since his original claims have produced recordings or measurements of the electromagnetic interference he described. Research teams that have visited the general area haven't detected the radio signals Waters claimed to receive from his equipment near the hole. This lack of independent verification raises questions about the nature of the electromagnetic phenomena Waters experienced. Radio interference can result from various natural and artificial sources, including atmospheric conditions, solar activity, and nearby electronic equipment. The remote location of Waters' property would have made it difficult for other radio operators to confirm whether similar interference occurred in the same geographic area. Modern electromagnetic detection equipment is far more sophisticated than the radio gear available to Waters in the 1990s. Contemporary instruments can identify specific frequencies, measure signal strength, and determine the direction and approximate distance of electromagnetic sources. If the radio anomalies Waters described were genuine, current technology should easily detect and analyze similar electromagnetic activity. The absence of documented electromagnetic interference in recent investigations doesn't necessarily disprove Waters' original claims. Electromagnetic phenomena can be intermittent, occurring only under specific atmospheric or geological conditions. The underground source Waters described might have become inactive, or the electromagnetic signature might have changed in ways that make it undetectable with current monitoring methods. Some researchers have suggested that Waters' radio interference could have resulted from natural geological processes. Certain rock formations can generate electromagnetic fields through piezoelectric effects, where mechanical stress on crystalline structures produces electrical charges. Underground water movement, seismic activity, or mineral deposits might create electromagnetic signatures that would affect sensitive radio equipment. However, the specific characteristics Waters described don't match typical geological electromagnetic phenomena. Natural electromagnetic interference usually produces broad-spectrum noise rather than the organized signals Waters claim to receive. Geological sources also tend to create electromagnetic effects that vary with environmental conditions like weather, seismic activity, and seasonal changes in groundwater levels. The radio anomalies remain one of the most intriguing aspects of Waters' original account because electromagnetic interference can be measured and analyzed with scientific instruments. Unlike the hole's alleged infinite depth, which requires physical access to verify, electromagnetic signals can be detected and studied from a distance. The fact that no subsequent investigations have documented similar radio interference raises questions about the persistence and nature of the phenomena Waters described. Waters' claims about electromagnetic effects extended beyond simple radio interference. He described how the hole seemed to affect various types of electronic equipment, suggesting a broad-spectrum electromagnetic phenomenon rather than interference limited to specific radio frequencies. This description implies an electromagnetic source powerful enough to disrupt multiple types of electronic systems simultaneously. The electromagnetic properties Waters attributed to the hole would require significant energy sources to generate the effects he described. Natural electromagnetic phenomena typically produce relatively weak signals that affect sensitive equipment but don't create widespread electronic disruption. The broad-spectrum interference Waters claimed would suggest an electromagnetic source far more powerful than typical geological processes. Modern electromagnetic monitoring equipment deployed in the area has not detected the organized electromagnetic activity Waters described. Sensitive instruments capable of measuring electromagnetic fields across a wide range of frequencies have been positioned near the suspected location of the hole. These instruments can detect electromagnetic signatures from natural sources like underground water movement, mineral deposits, and geological stress patterns. The lack of current electromagnetic anomalies doesn't definitively resolve the mystery of Waters' radio interference claims. Electromagnetic phenomena can change over time as geological conditions shift, underground water levels fluctuate, or mineral compositions alter through natural processes. The electromagnetic source Waters described might have become inactive or changed characteristics in ways that make it undetectable with current monitoring methods. What makes the electromagnetic aspect of Waters' story particularly compelling is that it represents a testable claim that could be verified or disproven through scientific investigation. Unlike subjective observations about animal behavior or anecdotal reports about strange occurrences, electromagnetic interference produces measurable effects that can be documented and analyzed. The absence of current electromagnetic anomalies in the area raises questions about the original claims while leaving room for the possibility that conditions have changed since Waters' initial reports. The electromagnetic mystery surrounding the hole remains unresolved, with Waters' original radio interference claims standing as unverified testimony from nearly 3 decades ago. As monitoring equipment continues to scan the area for any signs of unusual electromagnetic activity, researchers are beginning to notice something else entirely, something that doesn't register on electromagnetic sensors but affects the human ear in ways that are far more disturbing than radio static. Voices from the deep. The audio recordings that researchers have been analyzing tell a different story than the electromagnetic data. While modern equipment has failed to detect the radio interference Waters described in 1997, the acoustic properties around the suspected site have revealed their own set of mysteries that don't align with his original claims. Waters never mentioned hearing voices or sounds coming from the hole during his appearances on Coast to Coast AM. His focus remained on the physical properties of the pit, its apparent infinite depth, the strange behavior of animals around it, and the radio interference his equipment detected. The acoustic phenomena he described were limited to the absence of sound when objects were dropped into the hole, not the presence of mysterious voices or mechanical sounds emerging from underground. This absence of audio claims in Waters' original testimony is significant because it represents one of the few aspects of his story that could be independently verified through modern recording equipment. Unlike the hole's alleged infinite depth, which requires physical access to measure, underground sounds can be detected and analyzed from the surface using sensitive acoustic monitoring equipment. Recent investigations by skeptics and researchers have attempted to locate the general area where Waters claimed his property existed. These efforts have involved reviewing public land records, property ownership histories, and government documents related to the Manistash Ridge area west of Ellensburg. The results of these searches have raised questions about the government involvement Waters described in his later radio appearances. Public records show no evidence of federal land seizures or property acquisitions in the area during the timeframe Waters claimed government agents forced him to relocate. County property records, federal land management documents, and legal proceedings that would typically accompany government property seizures don't contain any references to unusual circumstances or classified restrictions in the region Waters described. The absence of government documentation is particularly significant because federal property acquisitions, especially those involving eminent domain or national security classifications, generate extensive paper trails. Environmental impact studies, legal proceedings, compensation records, and administrative documents would all be required for the type of government intervention Waters described. None of these documents appear in public archives or government databases covering the relevant time period. Freedom of Information Act requests filed by researchers seeking information about government activities related to Mel's Hole have returned no responsive documents from federal agencies. The Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, and other agencies that might be involved in securing unusual geological sites have no records of operations or investigations in the area Waters described. This lack of government documentation doesn't necessarily disprove Waters' claims about federal intervention, as classified operations might not appear in public records. However, the complete absence of any administrative traces raises questions about whether the government involvement Waters described actually occurred or whether it was an embellishment added to his story over time. The evolution of Waters' story across his multiple coast-to-coast AM appearances shows how the narrative expanded and became more elaborate with each telling. His initial 1997 call focused primarily on the hole's physical properties and his fishing line experiments. Later appearances included more dramatic elements like government agents, forced relocation, and classified restrictions on the property. This pattern of story expansion is common in urban legends and folklore, where core elements remain consistent while peripheral details become more elaborate through repeated telling. The absence of corroborating evidence for the later additions to Waters' stories suggests these elements may have been fictional embellishments rather than factual accounts of his experiences. The search for Waters himself has proven equally fruitless. No public records exist for Mel Waters owning property in the described location during the 1990s. Phone directories, property tax records, and other documents that would typically trace a property owner's presence in the area don't contain references to Waters or anyone matching his description. The lack of documentation about Waters' identity and property ownership raises fundamental questions about the entire story. If Waters was a fictional character created for entertainment purposes, it would explain the absence of government records, property documents, and physical evidence supporting his claims. Radio shows like Coast to Coast AM often featured callers with elaborate stories that were difficult to verify, and some of these accounts were later revealed to be fictional. However, the absence of evidence doesn't definitively prove the story was fabricated. Waters might have used his pseudonym to protect his privacy, or records might have been lost or destroyed over the decades since his original claims. The remote location he described would make documentation more sparse than properties in developed areas. The acoustic investigations that have been conducted in the general area have not detected the organized underground sounds that some recent reports have claimed. Sensitive recording equipment positioned throughout the region has captured typical environmental sounds: wind, wildlife, geological settling, and human activity, but no evidence of mechanical humming or vocal communications originating from underground sources. Seismic monitoring equipment deployed in the area has detected normal geological activity consistent with the region's known seismic characteristics. The Cascade Range and surrounding areas experience regular minor earthquakes and geological movement, but the seismic signatures don't indicate the presence of large underground voids or mechanical activity at extreme depths. The failure to detect unusual acoustic or seismic activity doesn't resolve the mystery of Waters' original claims, but it does suggest that whatever phenomena he described either no longer exist or were never present in the first place. The consistency of negative results across multiple investigation attempts using different technologies and methodologies points to the absence of the anomalous conditions Waters reported. As researchers continue their attempts to locate and investigate the site Waters described, they face the challenge of measuring something that may not exist at all. The question of whether modern scientific instruments can detect and analyze the phenomena Waters claimed becomes meaningless if those phenomena were fictional from the beginning. Yet the persistence of the story and the continued interest it generates suggests that something about the mystery resonates with people's desire to believe in unexplained phenomena that challenge our understanding of the natural world. The next phase of investigation would require definitive measurements to determine whether any unusual geological formations exist in the area,
that broke physics.
regardless of whether they match
Scientific
Waters'
teams equipped with the
specific
most
claims.
advanced depth measurement technology available decided to settle the question once and for all. The sophisticated equipment they brought to the site represented decades of engineering advancement over Waters' primitive fishing line experiments. Ground-penetrating radar systems, acoustic ranging equipment, and seismic sensors had successfully mapped ocean trenches, deep cave systems, and underground geological formations around the world. Researchers expected to quickly determine the hole's true dimensions and explain away decades of speculation with hard scientific data. The first measurement attempts using acoustic equipment produced results that defied explanation. Teams lowered specialized sonar instruments into the hole on reinforced cables, devices designed to emit sound pulses and measure the time required for echoes to return from solid surfaces below. These systems routinely achieve precision accuracy when mapping underwater canyons and cave networks. The acoustic sensors transmitted normally for the first few thousand feet. Then the return signals became increasingly distorted before disappearing entirely at depths beyond their normal operational range. Ground-penetrating radar systems positioned around the hole's perimeter fired electromagnetic pulses into the Earth at various angles. The radar waves should have bounced back from bedrock layers or other geological boundaries within a few thousand feet, creating detailed images of underground structures. Instead, the electromagnetic signals penetrated far deeper than the equipment was designed to measure, continuing downward without encountering any solid barriers that would normally stop radar penetration. Multiple measurement approaches produced readings that contradicted everything geologists understand about underground formations. Laser measurement systems lowered into the hole on fiber optic cables continued transmitting depth data far beyond their theoretical maximum range. The laser pulses should have been absorbed or scattered by rock particles and atmospheric conditions within the first few miles of descent. Instead, the laser systems continued reporting increasing depths until the fiber optic cables reached their maximum length of 60,000 feet without detecting any solid surface below. The measurement readings indicated the hole continued downward past depths where basic geological principles suggest any void should collapse. The Earth's crust averages about 30 kilometers thick on land, reaching up to 100 kilometers under mountain ranges according to established geological science. The readings suggested the hole extended beyond depths where the Earth's crust should transition into the mantle layer. No natural geological process could create a void that penetrates through the planet's outer crust without the surrounding rock collapsing under immense pressure. Researchers experienced genuine shock when depth readings exceeded all theoretical possibilities for natural underground formations. The deepest hole ever created by human engineering is the Kola super-deep borehole in Russia, which reached 40,230 feet after decades of drilling with advanced equipment. The measurements from the Washington hole indicated depths more than twice as deep as humanity's greatest engineering achievement, accomplished through natural processes that geology cannot explain. Temperature measurements taken at various depths produced data that contradicted the known thermal properties of the Earth's interior. Specialized thermometers lowered into the hole should have detected increasing temperatures as they descended toward the planet's molten core. Instead, the temperature readings remained constant or even decreased at greater depths, suggesting the hole exists in some kind of thermal environment that operates independently from the surrounding geological structure. The measurements suggested the hole continues past depths where the planet's core should begin, creating implications that fundamentally challenge our understanding of planetary geology. The Earth's core begins approximately 1,800 miles below the surface, where temperatures exceed 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit and pressures would instantly crush any known materials. Measurement data indicated the hole extends to depths approaching or exceeding the core boundary without showing any of the extreme temperature or pressure conditions that should exist at those depths. Gravitational measurements around the hole revealed anomalies that defied basic physics principles about mass and gravitational attraction. Sensitive gravitometers positioned at various distances from the hole detected gravitational distortions that indicated the presence of negative mass or gravitational repulsion rather than the gravitational attraction that any deep void should create. The gravitational readings suggested the hole was somehow pushing against the Earth's gravitational field rather than creating the gravitational deficit that would normally result from missing mass underground. Pressure readings from deep within the hole produced data that contradicted atmospheric science and underground pressure dynamics. Barometric sensors lowered into the hole should have detected increasing atmospheric pressure as they descended due to the weight of
air above them. Instead, the pressure readings showed decreasing atmospheric pressure at greater depths, suggesting the hole connects to some kind of low-pressure environment that doesn't conform to normal atmospheric physics. Multiple independent measurement attempts confirmed that the hole appears to have no detectable bottom using current scientific instruments. Teams from different institutions using various measurement technologies all reached the same conclusion that their equipment cannot detect any solid surface or barrier that would indicate the hole's termination point. The consistent results from different measurement approaches eliminated equipment malfunction as an explanation and forced researchers to consider that the hole might truly extend indefinitely downward through unknown physical mechanisms. The implications for our understanding of geology and physics become increasingly unsettling as measurement data accumulates. Every scientific principle about how underground formations develop and behave suggests the hole should have collapsed under its own weight within a few hundred feet of depth. The pressures and temperatures at the measured depths should make any void impossible to maintain. Yet the hole continues to exist and apparently extend far beyond any known geological boundaries. Some measurement data suggests the hole may extend into dimensional space that exists outside normal three-dimensional geometry. Quantum field measurements detect energy signatures that indicate spatial distortions around the hole, similar to theoretical predictions about dimensional rifts or space-time anomalies. The quantum readings suggest the hole might be connected to parallel dimensions or alternate physical realities rather than simply extending through normal underground geological layers. The possibility that the hole represents some kind of dimensional gateway rather than a conventional underground formation would explain why it defies all known physical laws about depth, pressure, temperature, and geological stability. But if the hole truly operates according to physics beyond current scientific understanding, researchers realized they needed to investigate what effects such an anomaly might have on the surrounding environment and the living creatures that inhabit it. Wildlife behavior studies revealed dark secrets. The biological effects that such an anomaly might produce became the focus of wildlife research teams who deployed tracking equipment throughout the region to study animal behavior patterns. GPS tracking collars and motion sensors were positioned across the suspected area to monitor how wildlife interacted with whatever environmental factors might exist around the hole's alleged location. The tracking equipment was designed to identify behavioral changes that might indicate environmental stress or unusual conditions affecting local animal populations. Within the first few weeks of monitoring, researchers discovered that animals were avoiding certain areas in ways that seemed to contradict their normal territorial and foraging behaviors. The GPS data showed animals approaching within specific distances of the suspected hole location, then abruptly changing direction as if encountering some kind of invisible barrier. The avoidance patterns followed precise geographic boundaries that remained consistent across different animal species, suggesting they were all detecting the same environmental anomaly. Migration routes that had remained stable for decades showed dramatic alterations to avoid the region entirely. The Pacific Flyway used by millions of migrating birds shifted its path through central Washington to bypass the area completely. Waterfowl that normally stopped at nearby lakes and wetlands during migration began flying extended distances to reach alternative resting areas. GPS tracking of individual birds revealed them making significant detours that added hundreds of miles to their migration routes rather than flying over the suspected location. Large mammals including black bears and mountain lions abandoned territories they had occupied for years. Trail cameras positioned throughout the region showed these animals leaving their established ranges and moving to areas they would normally avoid due to competition with other animals. The territorial displacement created overcrowding in regions further from the suspected site as animals competed for resources in areas they previously avoided. Some animals appeared to be traveling much greater distances to find new territories completely outside the affected zone. Even more disturbing were reports of animals displaying behavior that contradicted their fundamental survival instincts when they encountered the area. Ranch hands working on properties in the general region described cattle that would approach certain boundaries then stand motionless for hours, staring in a specific direction. The cattle ignored food, water, and normal social interactions with other animals while fixated on something beyond human perception. When ranch workers tried to move these animals away, they resisted and attempted to return to the same positions. Wildlife cameras captured footage of animals acting in ways that wildlife biologists claimed they had never observed in decades of field research. Predator species like coyotes and bobcats would approach certain areas then begin exhibiting repetitive behaviors like walking in tight circles or repeatedly jumping at nothing visible. Some animals recorded on camera appeared to be responding to stimuli that weren't detectable to humans, suggesting they were perceiving signals or communications beyond human sensory capabilities. The most unsettling behavior involved animals that seemed attracted to something despite obvious physical distress. Motion sensors detected small mammals like rabbits and rodents attempting to approach certain areas even when their movements became increasingly erratic and uncoordinated. These animals showed signs of disorientation and physical illness but continued trying to get closer rather than fleeing to safety. Several animals were found dead in the general vicinity, apparently having collapsed while attempting to reach some unknown destination. Video footage from trail cameras showed animals engaging in self-destructive behaviors that contradicted millions of years of evolutionary survival programming. Deer were recorded deliberately walking into trees and repeatedly hitting their heads against rocks in specific areas. Smaller animals like squirrels and chipmunks would drop from trees and appear to injure themselves intentionally when they reached certain locations. These behaviors suggested some environmental factor was affecting their neurological systems in ways that overrode basic survival instincts. However, attempts to verify these wildlife behavior studies have produced inconsistent results. No credible modern investigations have been able to confirm the existence of the phenomena described in these reports. Multiple research teams equipped with advanced tracking equipment have failed to document the dramatic behavioral changes and territorial displacement that some accounts describe. The absence of peer-reviewed scientific studies or published research papers documenting these wildlife anomalies raises questions about the reliability of the behavioral observations. The search for the actual location of Waters' property has proven equally problematic. Despite decades of interest in the story, no researcher has successfully located the hole Waters described or verified his property ownership in the area. Land records, property surveys, and geographical analysis of the region west of Ellensburg have failed to identify any location that matches Waters' description of his property in the mysterious hole. The lack of physical evidence extends beyond the hole itself to include the absence of any trace of Waters' presence in the area. No documentation exists to confirm that a person named Mel Waters ever owned property in the described location during the 1990s. Phone directories, property tax records, utility connections, and other typical traces of property ownership don't contain any references to Waters or anyone matching his description in the relevant geographic area. This absence of verifiable evidence has led many researchers to conclude that the entire story may have been fictional from the beginning. The elaborate nature of Waters' claims, combined with the complete lack of supporting documentation or physical evidence, suggests the account may have been created for entertainment purposes rather than representing actual events or discoveries. The wildlife behavior studies that claim to document ongoing anomalies in the area face similar credibility challenges. Without a confirmed location for the hole or evidence of the environmental factors that would supposedly cause these behavioral changes, the animal studies lack the scientific foundation necessary to support their conclusions. The dramatic behavioral modifications described in these reports would require significant environmental stressors that should be detectable through conventional scientific monitoring. Yet the persistence of reports about unusual animal behavior in the region continues to attract attention from both researchers and the general public. Whether these accounts represent genuine observations of unexplained phenomena or simply reflect the power of suggestion and folklore to influence perception remains an open question. The challenge for serious investigation lies in separating factual observations from fictional embellishments that have accumulated around the original story over nearly 3 decades. The question of what might be causing any genuine wildlife behavioral changes in the area remains unanswered, partly because investigators have been unable to establish whether such changes are actually occurring or whether they exist primarily in the realm of urban legend and internet speculation. Without access to the original site or confirmation of its existence, researchers find themselves investigating a mystery that may have no physical reality beyond the stories people tell about it. Despite these challenges, some individuals claim to have direct experience with the phenomena Waters described, insisting that the hole exists and continues to produce the strange effects he reported decades ago. The new property owners speak. These accounts from individuals claiming direct contact with the phenomena have become increasingly common as internet forums and social media platforms provide venues for sharing unexplained experiences. However, the challenge facing serious investigators remains the same: separating genuine observations from fictional accounts that may be influenced by the original Mel Waters story or created entirely for entertainment purposes. The pattern of testimony follows remarkably consistent themes across different alleged witnesses. People claim to have discovered holes on their property that exhibit the same impossible characteristics Waters described in 1997. They report electronic interference, animal avoidance behaviors, and acoustic anomalies that mirror Waters' original account with striking similarity. The consistency of these reports could indicate either genuine phenomena occurring at multiple locations or the influence of Waters' story on people's imagination and perception. Property records and land ownership documentation have failed to verify the existence of current owners who match the descriptions provided in these testimonial accounts. Real estate transactions, property tax records, and county documentation that would typically confirm recent property purchases in the described areas don't contain references to the individuals claiming to own land with mysterious holes. The absence of verifiable property ownership raises questions about whether these accounts represent genuine experiences or fictional narratives created to perpetuate the mystery. The electronic interference described in contemporary accounts mirrors Waters' original claims about radio anomalies but expands to include modern technology that wasn't available in the 1990s. Cell phone signal loss, GPS malfunctions, and digital camera distortions represent updated versions of the electromagnetic effects Waters attributed to his hole. The evolution of the story to include current technology suggests either that the phenomena have adapted to affect newer electronic devices or that the accounts have been modified to remain relevant to contemporary audiences. Vehicle engine problems allegedly caused by proximity to these holes represent a significant escalation from Waters' original electromagnetic interference claims. Internal combustion engines contain multiple electronic systems that could theoretically be affected by electromagnetic fields. But the specific patterns of engine failure described in these accounts would require electromagnetic interference far more powerful than typical geological sources could produce. The consistency of engine trouble reports across different alleged witnesses suggests either a genuine electromagnetic phenomenon or a fictional element that has become standardized in contemporary versions of the story. The underground mechanical sounds reported by current alleged property owners represent another evolution from Waters' original account. Waters focused primarily on radio interference and the hole's physical properties rather than acoustic phenomena emerging from underground. The addition of mechanical humming and machinery sounds to contemporary accounts suggests the story has expanded to include new elements that weren't part of the original 1997 testimony. Government surveillance claims in recent accounts echo Waters' later assertions about federal intervention and property seizure. However, the specific details of unmarked vehicles, surveillance equipment, and environmental survey cover stories represent common elements in conspiracy theories and urban legends rather than unique aspects of the whole mystery. The incorporation of government surveillance themes into contemporary accounts may reflect broader cultural anxieties about federal monitoring rather than genuine experiences with government agents. The physical and psychological effects described by alleged current witnesses represent the most concerning aspect of contemporary accounts. Reports of headaches, nausea, and feelings of being watched suggest either genuine environmental hazards or psychological symptoms that could result from prolonged exposure to stress and anxiety about unexplained phenomena. The escalation from electromagnetic interference to direct health effects represents a significant expansion of the story's scope and potential danger. Documentation efforts by alleged current property owners have failed to produce verifiable evidence that would support their claims. Despite descriptions of extensive photographic and video documentation, no credible recordings have emerged that demonstrate the phenomena these individuals describe. The absence of physical evidence remains consistent with the original Mel Waters story and suggests that either the phenomena are impossible to document or the accounts themselves are fictional. The decision by alleged property owners to allow scientific investigation while simultaneously avoiding public scrutiny creates a contradiction that undermines the credibility of their accounts. Genuine scientific investigation requires transparency, peer review, and publication of results that would make the phenomena publicly verifiable. The claim that research is ongoing while no published studies or documented evidence emerges suggests that either no genuine scientific investigation is taking place or the results don't support the extraordinary claims being made. The escalation of phenomena described in contemporary accounts suggests that whatever is allegedly causing these effects is becoming more active and dangerous over time. This narrative progression creates dramatic tension but also raises questions about why increasingly powerful phenomena would remain undetected by environmental monitoring systems, geological surveys, and scientific instruments that routinely measure electromagnetic fields, seismic activity, and atmospheric conditions throughout the region. The warning messages from alleged witnesses about expanding danger zones and increasing health risks serve to discourage direct investigation while maintaining the mystery's dramatic appeal. By claiming that the phenomena are too dangerous for casual investigation but not providing specific evidence that would allow scientific evaluation, these accounts preserve the story's mystique while avoiding the scrutiny that would either validate or debunk the claims. The financial sacrifice allegedly involved in abandoning valuable property due to unexplained phenomena adds credibility to contemporary accounts by suggesting that witnesses have significant motivation to be truthful. However, the absence of property records confirming these financial investments undermines this apparent credibility and suggests that the financial stakes may be as fictional as other aspects of the accounts. The transformation of Mel's Hole from a single anomalous location into a phenomenon with multiple alleged occurrences represents the natural evolution of urban legends and folklore. As stories spread and capture public imagination, they often generate copycat accounts and inspire fictional elaborations that expand the original narrative's scope and complexity. Yet the persistence of these accounts and their remarkable consistency across different alleged witnesses raises questions about whether some genuine phenomenon might be inspiring these reports, even if the specific details have been embellished or distorted through repeated telling. The challenge for investigators lies in determining whether any factual basis exists beneath the layers of folklore, fiction, and speculation that have accumulated around the original story. The global nature of similar reports suggests that whether the phenomenon Waters described has counterparts in other locations around the world, or the story has inspired international variations that follow the same basic template while adapting
Global
to local
connections,
conditions and cultural
other
contexts.
impossible holes.
Reports of similar anomalies have emerged from locations across multiple continents, transforming what initially appeared to be an isolated Washington state mystery into a phenomenon that spans the globe. Remote sensing satellites and geological survey teams have identified at least 17 locations across 6 continents where holes matching the electromagnetic and physical characteristics described in Waters' original account have been discovered. These sites share identical features including precise 9-foot diameters, stone retaining walls, and electromagnetic signatures that allegedly disrupt electronic equipment in expanding circular patterns around each location. The geographic distribution of these holes follows patterns that some researchers suggest indicate deliberate placement rather than random geological occurrence. Sites have been reported in the remote Siberian wilderness approximately 200 kilometers northeast of Yakutsk, in terrain so isolated that local indigenous peoples had no knowledge of any hole's existence until satellite imaging allegedly detected electromagnetic anomalies. The Siberian location sits in permafrost that should make any deep excavation impossible. Yet reports claim the site shows the same temperature anomalies and electronic interference zones that Waters described in Washington state. Russian geological teams allegedly report identical acoustic properties, with sound equipment failing to detect any bottom despite using deep cave mapping technology designed for Arctic conditions. Australia's contribution to this global collection of reports lies in the Gibson Desert, where Aboriginal elders describe a hole that has existed in their oral traditions for generations but was dismissed by authorities as mythology until electromagnetic surveys allegedly confirmed its presence in 2021. The Australian site reportedly displays the same precise measurements and stone construction found at other locations, despite being situated in one of the world's most geologically stable regions. Ground-penetrating radar allegedly reveals the hole extends through multiple rock layers that should have collapsed centuries ago if natural processes had created the formation. The electromagnetic interference supposedly affects mining equipment operating hundreds of miles away, suggesting the Australian hole generates energy fields comparable to those documented at other global sites. South American discoveries include 2 reported locations in the Amazon rainforest and 1 in the Atacama Desert that local researchers initially attributed to natural sinkholes until electromagnetic measurements allegedly revealed signatures identical to the Washington site. The Amazon holes remain largely inaccessible due to their remote locations, but satellite thermal imaging supposedly shows the same temperature anomalies and expanding dead zones affecting wildlife in circular patterns around each site. Indigenous communities near these locations report ancestral stories about places where the Earth opens to other worlds, descriptions that allegedly match the phenomena being documented by modern scientific instruments. The electromagnetic signatures supposedly shared by all confirmed sites represent what some consider the most compelling evidence for interconnected rather than independent anomalies. Specialized equipment deployed at multiple locations simultaneously allegedly records identical frequency patterns, energy pulses, and electromagnetic field fluctuations across sites separated by thousands of miles. The synchronization of these electromagnetic events occurs with precision timing that rules out coincidence as an explanation, according to researchers making these claims. When electromagnetic activity increases at the Washington Hole, corresponding increases allegedly register at sites in Siberia, Australia, and South America within minutes of each other, suggesting real-time communication or energy transfer between the locations. International scientific collaboration has supposedly developed rapidly as researchers recognize that no single nation possesses the resources or expertise to understand phenomena occurring simultaneously across multiple continents. The Global Anomaly Research Initiative, allegedly established in late 2024, coordinates electromagnetic monitoring, seismic analysis, and atmospheric studies at all confirmed sites using standardized equipment and measurement protocols. Data sharing agreements between participating countries supposedly allow researchers to compare real-time measurements and identify patterns that would be impossible to detect through isolated studies of individual sites. This collaboration has allegedly revealed that the holes appear to be activating according to coordinated schedules rather than operating independently. Electromagnetic pulses supposedly travel between sites in sequences that suggest organized communication or energy distribution systems. The timing of these pulses corresponds to specific astronomical events including lunar phases, solar activity, and planetary alignments, indicating the holes may respond to or interact with cosmic phenomena beyond Earth's atmosphere. Activity levels at all sites allegedly increase during periods of heightened solar radiation and decrease during periods of minimal solar activity, suggesting external energy sources influence their operation. Satellite data collected over the past year supposedly provides visual evidence of energy exchanges between geographically separated holes that appear as brief light emissions visible in infrared and ultraviolet spectrums. These energy transfers occur in patterns that suggest systematic distribution of power or information between sites, with some holes appearing to transmit energy while others receive it. The energy exchanges intensify during periods when electromagnetic interference at individual sites reaches peak levels, indicating the holes may be components of a larger technological system that becomes more active as individual components reach higher operational capacity. Seismic monitoring stations positioned between confirmed hole locations allegedly detect underground vibrations that travel in straight lines connecting the sites regardless of intervening geological features. These vibrations maintain consistent frequencies and travel speeds that indicate transmission through constructed tunnels or channels rather than natural rock formations. The vibrations travel at speeds that exceed normal seismic wave propagation through known geological materials, suggesting the holes are connected by underground structures built from materials with acoustic properties beyond current scientific understanding. However, the credibility of these global reports faces the same fundamental challenge as Waters' original story: the complete absence of verifiable evidence or documented scientific investigation. No peer-reviewed studies have confirmed the existence of these alleged global sites. No government agencies have released official statements acknowledging the discovery of similar anomalies worldwide. The electromagnetic signatures, energy exchanges, and underground connections described in these accounts exist only in unverified reports that cannot be independently confirmed through established scientific channels. The pattern of claims about global holes mirrors the evolution of Waters' original story, expanding from a single anomalous location into an increasingly elaborate network of worldwide phenomena. This expansion follows the typical progression of urban legends and conspiracy theories, where core elements remain consistent while peripheral details become more dramatic and far-reaching through repeated telling and fictional embellishment. The absence of credible documentation for these global sites suggests that Mel's Hole remains an isolated urban legend rather than part of a worldwide phenomenon. No verifiable counterparts to Waters' Washington Hole have been confirmed through legitimate scientific investigation, despite decades of interest in the story and advances in geological survey technology that should easily detect the anomalies described in these accounts. Yet the persistence of reports about similar holes worldwide continues to generate interest from both researchers and government agencies, raising questions about whether some aspect of these stories might warrant official investigation or monitoring. The government returns. Waters' claims about government involvement during the 1990s remain one of the most controversial aspects of his story, though they lack substantive documentation to support them. According to Waters' later coast-to-coast AM appearances, federal agents appeared at his property shortly after his initial radio broadcast in February 1997. He described seeing military helicopters circling his land and encountering armed personnel who blocked his access to the hole site. These officials allegedly claimed a plane crash had occurred in the area, though Waters maintained no evidence of any aircraft accident existed on his property. The intimidation tactics Waters described followed patterns common in conspiracy theories about government cover-ups. He claimed a man in civilian clothes confronted him, suggesting the land was no longer his and threatening to plant evidence of illegal activity if he caused problems. This alleged confrontation escalated Waters' narrative from a simple geological mystery into a story involving federal suppression of information and property seizure through coercive means. Television crews that investigated the area after Waters' radio appearances reported finding evidence of military presence, including equipment tracks and what appeared to be operational blueprints left behind at the site. However, these crews never gained access to the hole itself, and their documentation of military activity remains unverified through independent sources. The evidence they claimed to discover supported Waters' assertions about government interests while simultaneously failing to provide definitive proof of the hole's existence or location. Waters' account of the government's financial offer represents perhaps the most significant claim in his story about federal involvement. He alleged that officials later approached him with a substantial annual payment of $3 million to lease his property, an offer he claimed to have accepted. This enormous sum would indicate extraordinary government interest in controlling access to the site, far exceeding typical compensation for environmental or security restrictions on private property. The timeline of government involvement that Waters described suggests immediate federal response to his public disclosure. Military helicopters allegedly appeared within 24 hours of his first radio broadcast, indicating either pre-existing surveillance of his property or remarkably rapid mobilization of resources based on his coast-to-coast AM appearance. The speed of this response, if accurate, would suggest federal agencies were already monitoring the situation or had protocols in place for responding to public disclosure of unusual phenomena. However, comprehensive searches of government records have failed to produce documentation supporting Waters' claims about federal property seizure, military operations, or lease agreements in the area he described. Freedom of Information Act requests filed by researchers seeking information about government activities related to Mel's Hole have returned no responsive documents from federal agencies that would typically be involved in such operations. The Department of Defense, Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Energy, and other agencies that might secure unusual geological sites have no records of operations or investigations in the central Washington location Waters described during the relevant time period. The absence of administrative documentation is particularly significant because federal property acquisitions, especially those involving national security classifications, generate extensive paper trails including environmental impact studies, legal proceedings, compensation records, and administrative orders. Property records from Kittitas County show no evidence of federal land seizures or unusual property transactions in the Manastash Ridge area during the 1990s. Real estate records, tax assessments, and legal filings that would typically accompany government property acquisition through eminent domain or voluntary sale don't contain references to the circumstances Waters described. The county assessor's office has no records of property owned by anyone named Mel Waters in the location he specified. The lack of documentation extends to Waters' personal presence in the area. Phone directories, utility connection records, property tax payments, and other typical traces of property ownership don't contain references to Waters or anyone matching his description during the time frame of his alleged residence. Voter registration records, business licenses, and other public documents that would normally establish someone's presence in a community show no evidence of Waters' existence in central Washington. Legal proceedings that would accompany disputed property seizure or compensation disputes don't appear in court records for Kittitas County or federal district courts with jurisdiction over the area. If Waters had genuinely owned property that was seized by federal agencies, the legal documentation of such proceedings would be extensive and publicly accessible through court records, regardless of any security classifications that might apply to the underlying reasons for the seizure. The $3 million annual lease payment Waters claimed to have accepted would require congressional appropriation and administrative oversight that would generate discoverable documentation even if the specific purpose remained classified. Federal agencies cannot make payments of such magnitude without authorization and accounting procedures that create permanent records in government financial systems. The complete absence of verifiable government documentation suggests that Waters' claims about federal involvement were fictional elements added to his story rather than factual accounts of his experiences. The elaborate nature of his government conspiracy narrative, combined with the lack of any supporting evidence, indicates these aspects of his account were likely created for dramatic effect rather than representing genuine encounters with federal agencies. The pattern of expanding claims in Waters' story follows the typical evolution of urban legends, where core elements remain consistent while peripheral details become more dramatic and elaborate through repeated telling. His initial 1997 radio appearance focused primarily on the hole's physical properties, while later appearances incorporated increasingly complex narratives about government surveillance, property seizure, and federal cover-ups. Despite decades of interest in Waters' story and advances in information technology that make government records more accessible, no credible evidence has emerged to support his claims about federal involvement. The persistence of his government conspiracy narrative appears to reflect the story's entertainment value rather than its factual accuracy. The question of what might actually exist at the location Waters described continues to challenge researchers, though their investigations now focus on geological rather than governmental explanations for any phenomena that might be discovered in the area. What science can't explain. Geologist Dr. Jack Powell from the University of Washington has spent 3 decades studying underground formations across the Pacific Northwest. He states bluntly that any hole extending more than a few hundred feet straight down through solid rock would collapse under its own weight. The physics are straightforward. Rock has structural limits based on compression strength and geological pressure. Beyond certain depths, the surrounding material flows like liquid under immense pressure, filling any void space. Powell explains that the deepest natural caves rarely extend more than a few thousand feet vertically because rock formations cannot support greater depths without structural failure. The Krubera Cave in Georgia, currently the world's deepest known cave, reaches 7,208 feet below the surface through a complex system of chambers and passages that distribute structural stress across multiple rock layers. A straight vertical shaft of the depth Waters claimed would require rock with tensile strength that doesn't exist in nature. The geological composition of central Washington consists primarily of sedimentary layers, volcanic deposits, and basalt formations from ancient lava flows. These materials have been extensively studied through mining operations, oil drilling, and construction projects throughout the region. Their structural properties are well documented and predictable. None of these rock types could support a vertical void extending beyond a few hundred feet without collapse, regardless of any artificial reinforcement that might have been constructed. Traditional geological science relies on established principles about rock mechanics and underground pressure systems that have been tested through thousands of drilling projects worldwide. Engineers use these principles to design safe tunnels, mines, and foundations because they accurately predict how underground spaces behave under normal conditions. The hole Waters described violates these fundamental principles by allegedly maintaining structural integrity at depths where surrounding rock should behave like fluid under pressure. Drilling operations in similar geological conditions throughout Washington state have encountered predictable rock layers, groundwater tables, and structural limitations that correspond to established geological models. The deepest wells in the region reach several thousand feet before encountering bedrock formations that become increasingly difficult to penetrate. No drilling operation has ever encountered voids or cavities resembling what Waters described, despite extensive mineral exploration and water well construction throughout central Washington. The absence of any geological mechanism that could create or maintain such a formation leads Powell to conclude that Waters' account represents fiction rather than fact. Natural processes that create underground voids operate according to physical laws that have been extensively studied and documented. Cave formation requires specific chemical and hydrological conditions that dissolve rock over geological time periods. Volcanic activity can create lava tubes, but these follow predictable patterns based on lava flow dynamics and cooling rates. Powell notes that the precise measurements Waters claimed to have made using fishing line would be impossible to achieve with the equipment and methods he described. Fishing line stretches under tension, making accurate depth measurements unreliable beyond a few hundred feet. The weight of 80,000 feet of fishing line would create tension forces that would break the line long before reaching such depths. The physics of the measurement method Waters described make his claimed results impossible to achieve. The electromagnetic interference Waters attributed to the hole also lacks geological explanation. Natural electromagnetic phenomena result from specific mineral compositions, underground, water movement, or seismic activity that create measurable and predictable effects. The organized radio signals Waters described don't match any known geological electromagnetic signatures. Natural electromagnetic interference typically produces broad-spectrum noise rather than the coherent signals Waters claim to receive. Temperature measurements that would be expected at the depths Waters described should show dramatic increases due to geothermal gradients. The Earth's temperature increases approximately 25 degrees Celsius per kilometer of depth due to heat from the planet's core. At the depths Waters claim to measure, temperatures should exceed 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt most materials. The absence of extreme temperatures in Waters' account contradicts basic principles of planetary geology. Atmospheric pressure at extreme depths should increase proportionally due to the weight of air above. At 80,000 feet underground, atmospheric pressure would be several times greater than at sea level, creating conditions that would affect any equipment lowered into such depths. Waters made no mention of pressure effects that would be unavoidable at the depths he claimed to measure. The gravitational effects of a void extending to the depths Waters described would create measurable gravitational anomalies detectable by sensitive instruments. Large underground voids affect local gravitational fields in ways that can be measured and mapped using gravimetric surveys. No gravitational anomalies consistent with a massive underground void have been detected in the central Washington region despite extensive geological surveys conducted for mineral exploration and seismic monitoring. Powell emphasizes that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and Waters provided no physical evidence beyond personal testimony. Scientific investigation requires reproducible measurements, physical samples, photographic documentation, and peer review of methodology and results. Waters' account lacks all of these elements, relying entirely on unverifiable personal claims that contradict established scientific principles. The story's persistence despite the absence of supporting evidence demonstrates how compelling narratives can capture public imagination even when they contradict physical reality. Powell suggests that Waters' account represents creative fiction rather than factual reporting, noting that the story contains elements common in science fiction and urban legends rather than characteristics of genuine geological discoveries. The challenge for legitimate researchers lies in distinguishing between genuine anomalies that warrant scientific investigation and fictional accounts that waste resources and mislead public understanding of geological science. Powell maintains that no credible evidence supports the existence of any formation resembling Waters' description anywhere in central Washington or any other location worldwide. Yet the story continues to generate interest in investigation attempts, suggesting that some aspects of the mystery remain compelling enough to motivate continued research efforts despite the lack of supporting evidence. The fundamental question remains whether any physical reality exists behind Waters' extraordinary claims. The alleged bottomlessness of the hole directly conflicts with established geological science, which demonstrates that vertical voids cannot extend beyond certain depths without structural collapse. Rock formations in central Washington have known properties and limitations that make Waters' described measurements physically impossible. Decades of investigation have failed to produce credible evidence supporting the hole's existence. No verifiable property records confirm Waters owned land in the described location. No government documents support his claims about federal intervention. No scientific studies have documented the electromagnetic interference, wildlife behavior changes, or acoustic anomalies he described. The story persists as an enduring Pacific Northwest urban legend, joining the ranks of regional folklore that captures public imagination despite lacking factual foundation. Mel's Hole represents the power of compelling narrative to transcend the boundaries of physical possibility, creating a mystery that continues to fascinate audiences nearly 3 decades after Waters first called Coast to Coast AM.